Dance Theater, dance educator, former soloist with the Nikolai Dance Theater, and our fabulous yoga, dance, and fitness teacher. So we are so happy to have her here for an interview. We're going to get into some things about her history and what she teaches. I remember the first time I met Lynn, I came to take class at Art of Motion, and she gave me so much personal attention. And that's something that Laura and I really wanted to carry into Heart in Motion, because there's a personal attention for every single student that we both have. And this was something I really admired about Lynn as one of my mentors. And we're so lucky to have her expertise on our faculty. And I know right now, you have taught everything under the sun. You have a really versatile teaching background. And one of the classes that I personally think is the most unique is the Pilates ball class. And as you said, when you started in New York City years ago, after college, right, yoga wasn't as popular, but Pilates was. And that's really interesting, for me to even, wrap my mind around that concept. But the Pilates had a lot of reformers, a lot of different things. That's really the trend now with corporate Pilates as well. And the Pilates ball is something specific to the studio. And I'll just let everyone know there at home, Lynn teaches Pilates ball Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. She does do a traditional mat class on Sundays at 11:15. But what made you create this Pilates ball technique when everyone else at the time was working towards, the reformer and the chair and all those things? Power.
It's one word: money. Because as a professional dancer, you just didn't have extra optional income to be able to afford a reformer class. Because years ago, a reformer class was only done privately. They did not have group reformer options like they do now, which is so wonderful because, now
More affordable.
people, yeah, can enjoy it to have a group reformer class. It's a wonderful option. But years ago, you would have to spend even years ago, I'd say it would be between $50 and $75 for a private reformer class. And luckily we weren't starving dancers, because I earned enough to, live in a studio apartment. And it was I was lucky to earn a living since I was 21 in the profession. But I didn't have that extra income at all to be able to afford to splurge on, on my own training. So we thought, how can we do this ourselves without the machine? What could we do to train to create that isometric pressure, create the elongation of the muscles? And, we started using TheraBands, which were very inexpensive at the time, or we used tennis balls that we could squeeze or, put between our knees to squeeze. And really the root of it all, Nikki, is not just finances, because I think even, we all know how to live on, whatever your budget is for food. I remember one of my roommates, my college roommate and I, we used to live on $10 a week. We'd buy a dozen eggs and, a head of lettuce, and, we would have scrambled eggs one night and then an omelet the next night with like a little bit of cheese. And you would just stretch your budget because it's what you had. And I grew up with, blue collar grandparents that were Depression era, and they always learned how to reinvent something from what they had because they had so little. So it was the two words that I want to highlight are finances, money, and imagination. Again, we had to use our imagination because, again, we had these smaller studios. We had a very elite client base. A lot of them were models and, people that were in film and TV. And they wanted to have a certain appearance on camera, have certain posture, and they would come in and say, I need to have a strong core, or have flat stomach, or strong thighs, or I have a photo shoot, or I'm preparing for, XYZ. And it was our job to try to condition them as best as we could. Maybe people were coming out of a pregnancy, or, having their third child, or there were so many different specific realities. We had a lot of corporate women that had high stress in the workplace, and they just wanted to come and burn off steam after work. So creating the ball class came out of starting with a little ball, and my trampoline class where we taught on the trampoline. And then the trampolines were, again, you had to stack them, and you needed space to store those mini tramps. And then we just started experimenting with one ball and realized how many acrobatic things we could do. We could really work our back bends. We worked your balance. And then at the studio where we had more space on Chestnut Street, as you know, you have, 3,500 square feet of beautiful space. We found out that people said, oh, I have a ball in my basement. I have a ball, in my attic. And then we started collecting these balls. Some of them are, just moderately different sizes depending on your height. And as we collected them, we realized that it was using a prop takes you outside of your own self. It makes you extend your concentration into something else that makes you focus on a deeper level. So obviously in a beautiful ballet bar, your body is your instrument, but when you're working with conditioning where you're lifting barbells or you're balancing on a ball or you're, using a TheraBand as a prop, there's a deeper layer of concentration that goes on in the mind that for me helps me when I train as a dancer, memorizing choreography or focusing on a big lift with a partner. It just goes into that fascia and the deeper layers of concentration and
So
thinking.
talk a little bit about how yoga influences your practices.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. It's funny. This is a big confession and it's absolutely the truth. I fell in, they say you find yoga in your life when you most need it. And yoga came into my life. You're going to laugh. It's the absolute truth though. Because of a coupon. And we, back to the mail, I had the Ridgewood Community School brochure, and that's how that teaching started with the adult program. And we got an envelope, a conventional envelope with a myriad of coupons, free bagel, free yoga, free yogurt rather. And then there was this yoga coupon, and it said complimentary class. And it was a studio close by in Bergen County. And I was very interested in yoga, but hadn't actually made the step into the studio. And I had never, knock on wood, I had lots of accidents as a child with broken bones just from, skiing accidents and running around the playground. But it was my first ever dance injury. I'd never had a dance injury. And I had a hamstring injury at the time. And I was trying to self-heal and rest and do, somatics exercises and a Tylenol here and there, and it just wasn't working. So really out of desperation, I thought, oh, yoga, I'll try a yoga class. Maybe that can help me. And to make a long story short, I went and I took the class with the coupon and I met the teacher who was a very seasoned, Kim Peralta, very seasoned Iyengar teacher. And Iyengar is really rooted in alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And what was so attractive to me, wasn't just Kim's knowledge, deep knowledge of the body and alignment, was it had so much, I could relate it to the ballet bar, which was like place your body, alignment. And as modern dancers, where we go off center and we kind of throw our alignment in space and then see if we can regain our alignment. So I love that idea of mixing my knowledge with technique, and all of a sudden have this reservoir of yogic vocabulary and yogic knowledge. So through learning Iyengar yoga, my injury healed. It was amazing. I credit the yoga. I mean, maybe a little bit of rest in TLC as well, but the yoga really helped to realign my hip socket, get my hamstring where it needed to be. And I was so, so grateful for that. And then, of course, my teacher was teaching a 200 RYT, which means you train for 200 hours to become a registered yoga teacher. And I was able to study with Kim and Jay, who now teaches at the studio. Jay was in that training back then. Ben Wish. There's a lot of teachers in the area that Colleen, obviously Fontes, we all met each other then. And it was like a generation of yoga teachers that all were sort of training at the same time. And then that led to an aspiration to earn my 500 RYT. So I obviously needed 300 more hours. And then I met Raji Throne at Yoga Synthesis. And then I went on to study 300 more hours with Raji, where I loved his philosophy because even though I had a very strong Iyengar foundation, his philosophy introduced you to other voices in yoga, from Ashtanga to Anusara. And his mind is similar to the way my mind works, that I like to fuse things. I like to meld. I like to, even when I cook, I like to fusion in my cooking. I mean, I would never compete with Nikki's Italian family in a great Italian meal. But, if I make a lasagna, it's going to be rooted in, an Italian base, but I might throw feta cheese in or fresh spinach and, mix up ingredients a little bit. So as a choreographer, as you know, I am a modern choreographer, modern dancer, but I love to invite street dancers, capoeira, classical dancers. And I really did that in college when I would choreograph and I needed dancers and I would look at athletes and how beautiful their movement was. And I would invite athletes to come and perform. And we did that recently with the Zodiac and Horoscope Project, where we brought in a mixture of movers that weren't at all classically trained or contemporary in their background. But I've always just loved to see bodies in motion. That, whether they're skiers or dancers or yoga students or Pilates experts or runners or athletes, I just love to see people move.
Now about your first career in the dance world. I know you mentioned the Nikolai legacy. I didn't know that Nick himself was there at ADF when you won your first pre-professional dance award, which is incredible. But do you want to talk a little bit about your first career as a professional dancer?
Sure. Yes. It's funny. I really want to speak to all the dancers that are out there that have goals, and maybe some of your goals haven't been achieved yet. And it might be that you want to audition for a summer intensive in New York, or audition for, to be a dance major at a college or university, maybe go on an audition. And I was the kind of dancer that I never had a solo. I was always like a great group dancer. And I was never the best in the class. I was always like reaching to see if I could grommet my as high as Cynthia Riuli or as high as Elizabeth or as, I was motivated to be as good a student as I could, to have integrity in everything I did. But I always wanted to be better. I was always like, oh, I have to get back to class. I have to try again. And I think that was instilled, I think, in my parents, to just always to try to do your best. But my life as a professional dancer came sort of as an accident in a way, again, organically. And I had studied at the American Dance Festival as a scholarship student right after my junior year, and was very, very devoted to the Graham technique at the time. Obviously, Martha Graham was alive. And I studied with her senior company members, Peggy Lyman, who was amazing, Diane Gray, Armgard, Marianne Bachman, all the greats. They were remarkable. And when I went to New York City with my $1,000 in the bank to try to kind of my way, right? I studied at the Graham Studio. And then when I met Murray Lewis at American College Dance Festival Association, he said, there was feedback. There was a feedback session. And all the choreographers that we showed at the Boston Conservatory in that beautiful theater. And there was a feedback session, just like we do now with our colleagues with Bergen Dance Makers. And there were 10 of us that were chosen. And we were supposed to meet in a room at the Boston Conservatory, like room 2013. And I couldn't find the room. And I'm running around this conservatory. And I was late at the feedback session because I couldn't find it. It was like I was lost on a college campus. And I walked in and Murray looked at me and he goes, "What's your name? How old are you? Where are you from? Why are you late?" And I was so startled. I was so frightened. I said, "My name is Lynn Lesniak, and I'm 20 years old, and I'm from Connecticut College, and I choreograph Cool Wave." He goes, "Sit down. You're the one that's going to win the prize." Because he didn't, again, I didn't dance in the piece. So he didn't know who had choreographed it. So then I sat down. I still have his feedback on tape. I recorded it on a cassette tape. And he gave all the choreographers in the room feedback with Pauline Koner and Clay Taliaferro. So we had these three, epic choreographers, modern dance, phenoms, legacies, give us feedback and critiqued our work. It was intense. So you took notes and, you were graceful in receiving the feedback. And then Murray said to me, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm studying at the Graham Studio. I study there at the ADF. I want to go to the city and study at the Graham Studio." And he said, "Why are you doing that? Come and study with us. I want to introduce you to Nick. Nick is looking for dancers." And I didn't really know what Nick meant, So I bought my dance magazine. I did my homework. I wasn't familiar with Nikolai Dance Theater. I knew Murray was charismatic and remarkable, so I did my homework. And I was working at Young Audiences at the time. So on my lunch hour, I would Dance Magazine. And I went down to the Nikolai Lewis Dance Lab, which was down on 18th Street. The Graham Studio was uptown on the Upper East Side on 63rd Street, between 2nd and 3rd. And I went downtown, and Murray said, take class. We're looking for dancers. We're going to Portugal in 2 weeks. And I took class, and Nick, I was in the back row. I just wanted to be in the back and do the best I could. And after class, Nick called me up to talk to me, and he said, Murray told me all about you, and what are you doing? And I told him I was at the Graham Studio. He said, no, no, no. I want you to come and take class, and I want you to come and rehearse with the company. And I thought he meant to sweep the floors like we do in college, like when you do your work study. And I said, okay, I'll come and help, or run sound, or, bring props. And he goes, no, no. They used to call us dolls. That was their nickname. My dance teacher when I was a child called us ladybugs, and Nick used to call us all dolls. He said, okay, doll, you're going to come. You're going to rehearse 10 to 6. Be ready. We're going to Portugal in 2 weeks. And I was in Portugal. We actually we actually went to Boston, to the Globe Theater, to Fargo, North Dakota, and then went to Portugal.
Wow.
2 weeks to learn three reps, program A, B, and C.